Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Natalie, and today Anne and I are delighted to welcome you to the April webinar, Quick Start with Info Explorer. Info Explorer has been a popular Orchid module for a long time, enabling affordable business intelligence. It works with Sage 300 as well as other databases. And today we will focus on getting started with Info Explorer to get insight into Sage 300 data. Many people start with Info Explorer Lite, the free version that you can download and install from the Orchid website after entering your company details. You also have access to over 40 sample cubes to get started, which provide insight into Sage 300 core modules, as well as third-party modules such as Orchid RMA, bin tracking, norming resource manager, asset management, Technisoft service manager. So you can pull in your own data and customize the cubes, the charts, and the dashboards and see the real power of Info Explorer. So today we will explore the various analysis tools available in Info Explorer, such as the ability to slice and dice the way you view the data in order to analyze performance, identify trends, and exceptions. And one key advantage of Info Explorer is that you can drill through to the underlying Sage 300 screen, be it the master file or a transaction like an AP invoice, and we will show you that as well. Info Explorer has a write-back option for budgeting and forecasting. It's covered in separate videos in quite a lot of details, so we will not look at that aspect today. So today, after we download and install Info Explorer, we will look at, we'll download a sample cube, connect it to Sage 300 data and start analyzing. And for that, we will use two sample cubes, the AP outstanding balances by year, vendor and vendor group, as well as the GL detail account. And for that, we have a 25-minute video, which I will switch to now.
Welcome to this quick start video, getting started with Info Explorer. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems. In this video, we're going to first download and install Info Explorer, and then we're going to analyze using Info Explorer. And for this, we're going to use two of our sample cubes, the AP outstanding balances and the GL detail by account. Initially, we're going to go to orchid.systems, download Info Explorer, install Info Explorer, and then review the sample cubes that we have on our website, orchid.systems. And we're going to download AP outstanding balances and GL detail by account. To download Info Explorer, go to orchid.systems, product downloads, and you'll find Info Explorer on the first page. You need to fill in your download details, fill in your reseller details, and submit the form. And then you can install from the downloaded file. After installing Info Explorer, you can run from your Start programs. You can add to your Start bar, or add to your taskbar, or even add to your Sage 300 desktop by adding a new icon to the desktop and browse to find the directory where you have just installed the programs. We have downloaded Info Explorer and installed Info Explorer. We're now going to review the sample cubes, and in particular, we're going to download the AP outstanding balances cubed. To review the sample cubes, you can go to orchid.systems, select Resources, and Info Explorer Sample Cubes. The cubes are categorized by module. So selecting Accounts Payable, we see the sample cubes that are available for Accounts Payable, Accounts Receivable, bin tracking, general ledger, and so on. So depending on your area that you want to analyze, you can download a sample cube and then use that on your own company data. Or from within Info Explorer itself, you can click on Download Sample Cubes, which takes you to the same page on our website. But now when you select a cube, it will be opened automatically in Info Explorer. So we're going to click on Accounts Payable and select the AP Outstanding Balances cube. And the cube is opened with the data that was in the database when we last refreshed the cube, and in this case it was last refreshed in 2017 on our sample data. Having downloaded the AP Outstanding Balances cube, we're now going to start working with this cube. We're going to connect it to our own database and refresh the data. And then we're going to see how we can start slicing and dicing to look at different aspects of the data that's in the cube. To refresh the cube on your own data, you need to go to the properties of the cube and change the connection details. And these are the SQL details that you're filling in, the server name, database name, and SQL user to use. And once you've changed the connection details, we would recommend that you save this cube. And then when you refresh, any parameters that are required will be prompted for. And this is the date as of which we're going to age the AP balances. So I'm going to enter the 31st of May 2020 based on my data, and the cube and views are refreshed based on the current date and time. And I'm now going to select the total outstanding view to see what we can do to explore this data. So we're currently looking at the amount due, the amount overdue, due in the current month, due next month, and due in the next 2 months or greater than 2 months. So the total outstanding amount is aged based on the parameter date that I entered at the time of refreshing. I'm just going to simplify this view so I just see the amount due. So we can drag the facts from the displayed area to the available area for those ones we don't want to see. And now we can see the amount due is 8.5 million. And we can drag down the year to see which year those amounts are due. I've got some AP invoices, the majority due in 2019 and some in 2020. So if we just select the years we want to see, so for any dimension, we can click on the filter and select the values that we want to see. And we're seeing the total for our entire company. If we want to see this broken down by vendor group, we could drag the vendor group. So I'm dragging the vendor group dimension from the available area to one of my rows. So now I'm seeing the total amount for Orc Ltd split out by vendor group. And if we wanted to see how that broke out by vendor, we could then get the vendor code and drag it down. And so on. We can change our rows and columns. And if I wanted to see a total for my vendor groups, I could go to the display and show my row totals. So now I'm seeing the total for the intercompany vendor group is 47, whereas the total for my inventory purchases is 5 million. And if this was a view that I wanted to see every day, I could copy the view and rename it Total by Vendor Group and Vendor, and drag it to the positioning. And I could have left my total outstanding as it was originally. So just dragging the facts in that I want to see. On my new view, I could simplify the view if I only want to see it by vendor group. And if I want to see this tomorrow, I would save the cube. And tomorrow when I refresh my cube, all the other views, including my new one, total by vendor group and vendor, would be refreshed. And in the same way that I changed the rows from vendor group to vendor, I could do the same for my columns. So I could see the total amount due split out by quarter, 33,000 in quarter 2, and even split that out by month, showing me in quarter 2 it's split between May and June. So any of the dimensions can be rows or columns in your current view. We've seen how to slice and dice our data to display different values as our rows and columns, and in fact how to save a different configuration of rows and columns as a new view for easy access the next time you want to use this cube. We're now going to look at sorting and filtering data and how to find exceptions. I'm just going to simplify this view a bit. And then per vendor group, I'm going to display the vendor within the vendor group. And we can see the different vendors within the different vendor groups. We can sort the rows based on a selected column. So in this case, I'd be sorting my vendors or vendor groups based on my 2019 data. So now my vendors are sorted ascending within the vendor groups. And we can filter by pre-selecting dimension values, or we can add a dynamic filter, for example, to filter all our rows where the vendor group is equal to intercompany. And these filters can be turned on or off by selecting this option on the view itself. We can edit this pre-filter and select a different value. So now we're seeing all the vendors in the inventory purchases group. And the figures are sorted ascending by the 2019 year value. And we could toggle between sorting our vendors ascending by our 2019 amount due or descending by our 2019 amount due by clicking on the Sort by Vendor. In addition to filtering and sorting, we can add formulas, which we can also filter and sort vendors by, and add formatting to the formulas or to the base facts that have been brought into the cube. To add a new formula, you go to Edit Fields and click Create a New Fact. And I'm going to add a new fact, which is going to rank the amount due descending. So it's going to be a fact, and these are the type of formulas you can add. You can count the number of records, you can do a distinct count of values in the cube, calculate the minimum, maximum, or average value, or write your own formula, for example, to calculate margin percent. But for our descending rank, we just need to select descending rank and say which field we're going to rank, and in our case it's amount due. And when we save this, you will see it's automatically added an amount due rank, and it is sorted descending because we had previously sorted our vendors by amount due. But it's being ranked as well in the 2019 years and the 2020 year and in total. So we could now sort our vendors based on the descending rank of the amount due. And in this case, the smallest vendor is 1750, the largest vendor is 4540. And if we change our sort order, we would see our largest vendor first. Another formula that we had added earlier is the percentage of column. So if I drag that down into our facts, we will now see that Leon Industries is 28.59% of the inventory purchases, whereas Gould Manufacturing is 3.59% of the inventory purchases. And if we deselect our vendor group based on inventory purchases, we will see that all the vendors are both ranked within vendor group and the percentage of column is calculated, as well as the percentage of the inventory group per total. So 0.06% is the intercompany total, 67% is our inventory purchases total. And if we collapse our rows, we will see just the totals for the vendor groups and the ranking and the percentage of column. And expanding selectively, we would see the individual vendors within each of the groups. And you can add formatting, both in terms of color and the number of decimal places that are displayed, by creating the style and applying it to the appropriate field. So if we want to have a new style on our percentage of column, we can create a new style. And we want to do conditional formatting on our percentage column, so we're going to create a red style, a green style, and orange. And then create a new rule for our percentage column. So when the value is between 0 and 30, we're going to make it go green. Between 30 and 50, we're going to make it go orange. And greater than 50, we're going to make it go red. And now we have our percentage column color-coded accordingly. In addition to formulas and formatting, we can create charts and dashboards. For our graph, I'm just going to simplify this view. I'm going to look at the year 2020 only, turn off the totals of the columns, and look at vendor groups only, and the amount due only. To create a new chart, we select New Chart, and we can see what chart type we want, maybe a bar chart or a pie chart. If that's what we want, we then just go File, Save As, and this is pie by vendor group. And for your dashboards, any of your views or charts can be placed on the dashboard. So to create a new dashboard, we can then just drag our new chart, drag our total outstanding, or as many of the views as we want. And then we can change the size of the components as we see fit. And now we have 3x1 dashboard. And the last thing we're going to have a look at is drill down to the underlying records in the cube and drill through to the Sage 300 screens. When you're looking at a total, you can always right-hand mouse button and drill down, and it will show you the underlying transactions that make up that particular total. So these are all the US vendors that fall into that USA vendor group. And from here, you can Control-C, Control-V to paste into Excel if you need to do that. Drill through allows you to drill back into the data entry screen for the associated transaction, or the master file record for the records that you're looking at. So if we extend our view to look at our vendors, and within vendors, we look at our document numbers. And for example, if we were to right-hand mouse button on this particular amount, we can either drill through to the AP invoice, which we'll do shortly, or drill through to the AP vendor activity. So it's picking up which vendor you're looking at and which document you're looking at. And now I need to fill in my Sage 300 credentials, and it's only at this stage that I'm using a Sage 300 LAN pack. And here's the vendor activity for this particular vendor that I drilled into, 7,300, and I've got all the full functionality of the AP vendor activity. Or I could choose to drill through to the AP invoice itself. And now it's going to open up the AP invoice screen. And because I have Document Management Link installed, I will have access to the AP invoice attachment itself if I had attached it in. But we're seeing the individual invoice for the transaction number where I clicked Drill Through. We have now seen some of the highlights of the Info Explorer analysis tools in analyzing the AP Outstanding Invoices cube. We're now going to look at another sample cube on General Ledger Single Year History. Back in Info Explorer, we're going to download one of the GL sample cubes. And this is the general ledger detail by single year. Connect it to our current database. Save this cube and click refresh. And the fiscal year that we want to look at is 2020. Similarly to our accounts payable cube, we now have different views on this data, but the dimensions are based on the general ledger data, as are the facts. In this view, I am looking at the account group, and it is split out by region. So we could select some of the account groups, for example, revenue and cost of sales, and then include division in our analysis too, either as a row or as a column. So now we're seeing each of the divisions split out by the regions. And if we want to see the natural account, we can drag down the account segment. And now we see the natural account, the division, and the region. And this particular cube also has the batch entry number. So if we drag that down too, we can now drill through back into the Sage 300 screen where this entry was posted. And as we can in any of our cubes, we could add formulas, filter, format, conditional formatting, add dashboards and charts. For example, looking at our income statement by account group, if our expectation for our fixed charges were that they were more or less the same month on month, we could drag down the fiscal period and then compare month on month. But to aid this process, we could add a new formula for our percentage increase. And this is a fact, sum of the value, but we're going to display it as a percentage variation across. And now we have a percentage variation across the different months, so it's easier to pick up the anomalies. But let's use color coding as well to make these stand out higher. So go back to our percent increase, edit the style, and initially we'll create two styles, red, where we're going to make the background color go light red, and green, where the background color will be light green. And then for our percentage increase, we will create a new rule from -1,000 to 30, and red between 30 and 100. And now we see our exceptions being highlighted more easily. And now if we filter on our fixed charges and drag down our account, we see that the anomaly is created largely in the rent, the office rent 6560. Using conditional formatting highlights exceptions more readily than looking for the numbers yourself. And we can also see we can open multiple cubes at the same time. For more information on Info Explorer and more of the functionality that you can apply to the cubes, please refer to our website. Info Explorer comes in 3 different editions. Info Explorer Lite, which is free. You still need to apply for a serial number. The free version is restricted to sample cubes only. That means you can't amend the query, add new fields, you cannot create new cubes, and you cannot export the cube data. The standard Info Explorer license allows you all the functionality I have demonstrated and more. You can access the sample cubes, you can amend the queries in the sample cubes, and you can create your own cubes and export the cube data. There's also an Info Explorer edition with a write-back license, which allows you to do top-down and bottom-up budgeting based on your current data, and at a single click of a button, update Sage 300 directly with this data. After downloading and installing Info Explorer, you will have 30 days to apply for an activation code from Orchid. You need this activation code whether you're running Info Explorer Lite, Standard, or with Writeback. You will get a different activation code depending on the functionality you have purchased or if you're running the free version. Please refer to our website for more information on Info Explorer, including training guides and training videos.
Thank you, Anne. So we've seen how you can download Info Explorer, select some sample cubes to meet your analytical requirements, and connect to your Sage 300 data to analyze Sage 300 core modules as well as third-party information. And we've looked at a range of data analysis tools that you can use in Info Explorer. Now that leads us to our first questions, probably the right time to answer this one. Does one load Info Explorer on a server where Sage resides or on each workstation? It really depends how people are accessing what they're doing with it. Most people install on each workstation because the licensing is per user machine. However, when people connect using a terminal server, sometimes people have installed it on the terminal server where the user used to connect, where they have access to the data. In which case, you would get the number of licenses that you have for the number of people that connect to the terminal server. Another question that came up is when we don't use Sage 300 data, can we do the same thing that we can do with the Sage 300 data cubes that we've shown you? So as we've mentioned, you can connect with Info Explorer. You can connect to any SQL or ODBC data sources. So a lot of people use it for Sage CRM and non-Sage data, such as we have people running it with SAP B1 or Odoo or other ERP applications. All the functionality of adding a formula, adding a fact, selecting your query, dragging and dropping the dimensions, collapsing, expanding, all that is available. The thing that is not available is if you're not running Sage 300, is drilling through back to the underlying Sage 300 screen, as this is geared all around Sage 300. It's not configured for other systems. And also the sample cubes that we have at the moment are only for Sage 300. So with the different versions that we have described, a lot of people start with Info Explorer Lite because we find that the best way to explore Info Explorer is to try it on your own data. This is when you really see the power that it has to identify exceptions, to see trends, and not just a series of numbers that move on the screen. So you can try that. You have 30 days, and then you can apply for an activation code with your machine name. So the machine name where Info Explorer is installed. And just a reminder that Info Explorer is the only Orchid module that an end user can download themselves. They need to fill in their company details, enter their Sage 300 business partner, and then can download the module as well as the training guide and have access to the sample cubes. Info Explorer also works well in conjunction with other Orchid modules, particularly with Process Scheduler Level 1, as you can automatically refresh and email the cubes to the users that need it. So a lot of people would have one cube, for example, particularly in the sales analysis world. So you have an OE cube, which has a parameter by salesperson. And then you would use Process Scheduler to set the cube parameter to salesperson 1 and email salesperson 1 their cube with only their data. Then salesperson 2 will have the same cube with the same views but with only the data that belong to salesperson too. And then you can use security to make sure they can't change, the query can't change these values, which protects the security of your data and avoids also the risks of running large reports during business hours, as you can use Process Scheduler to schedule the refreshing of the data out of business hours, and when the users come in the office or get to their desk and look at their emails, they have the data updated as of the night before. We have alluded to optional tables and using Info Explorer for budgeting and forecasting. So this is when you use Info Explorer to do your top-down budgeting and to store your budget at any level in the organization, such as customer and item or item category. And there are a couple of training videos on how to use optional tables in conjunction with Info Explorer right back for budgeting and forecasting. Finally, most of you are probably aware that when using optional fields in Sage 300, the reporting and building the query can be a bit tricky, as you have to go back to the optional table setup to get the right value as many times as you have optional fields. So with data views, it helps you simplify that reporting. Each optional field becomes a column in your query, and you can then use a straightforward query to do your analysis by optional fields. So if you have your customer optional fields or your item optional fields, you can drill down into your analysis by those values, which could be your item color, your customer grouping at a more granular level than just the customer group in standard Sage 300. So all this is explained on the website. So we suggest that you have a look at the Orchid website, in particular the resources where you can access the product download and the sample cubes, as well as the training material and the various videos. So today was a relatively brief presentation. So now we are ready to answer any other questions that that you may have. And you will receive a recording of this webinar, as well as the quick start video will be available on the website as well in the next couple of days. So you can use this to share with all your clients and get going with analyzing your Sage 300 data and other data. So while you're writing your questions, I'll make Anne the presenter so that she can show us a few additional things. And I think we'll start with the security options in Info Explorer. How can I protect my cube?
Thanks, Natalie, and good afternoon, everyone. Security in Info Explorer cubes. I'm guessing you can see my Info Explorer screen. I'm not getting the thumbs up. I am now getting the thumbs up. Okay, so on the I'm in the AP Outstanding Balances cube. So per cube, you can set up a number of different levels of security. So first of all, we would recommend that when you refresh these cubes and save them on the network somewhere, that they are stored in a network folder which only the right users have access to. So for example, if it's a GL cube, then it should only be the people who have access to GL. But over and above that, you can lock the cube files. So if I specify a password here, when you go File Open, you would need to key in this password before the cube opened. So you're able to protect the entire cube file. Or if from a security point of view, if I, as a user for Anne, have access to the AP Outstanding cube, but I only have access to the Orc Limited company database, I could lock the connections. So once the cube has been set up, I would have a password on the connections, and that would mean
that Anne wouldn't be able to come to the properties, go to the connection, and change this to point to another company database. Before getting to the connection screen, Anne would need to key in the password. Other passwords you can set is lock the cubes. So with the light version of Info Explorer, you can only have one query in a cube. So that means data from one area, through one SQL query. But you can have, with the license, the Info Explorer standard, you can have multiple cubes within the one file. So we could have a query on AP for the outstanding balances. We could have another cube or query on AR for the AR outstanding balances. And that means your dashboards could have views from both AP and AR. So if you do have a cube file with multiple queries in, you can then lock some of the queries for some of the people, the cubes, so they wouldn't be able to see that without specifying the password. Another password security you can have is lock the refresh. So you saw earlier when I clicked the refresh, it'll execute the query and bring back the data. Now, if you have a large query, maybe it takes 5 or 10 minutes to refresh, you may not want people to do that during the day when people are working on their production system. So in that case, we'd recommend you use Process Scheduler and schedule the cubes overnight and leave the refreshed version on the server for people to pick up, or even email to them if you want to do that. So if you put a password on the refresh, when you click refresh here, it would prompt you, what's the password? So people who don't know the password couldn't refresh during the day and slow the production server down. It could only be done by people with the password and or by Process Scheduler that would provide the password at the time of refreshing. And if you're using Info Explorer for budgeting, you can lock both the write back. So when somebody has updated the budget figures in the cube, they need to type in the password before they write it directly back to the GL budgets or the InfoSet budgets, depending which way you're working. And when you write back to Sage 300 from Info Explorer with write back, these budget figures are written back using a SQL query and not using the views, because a SQL query is much quicker than using the views. And so the query is actually in the cube as well to do the write back. So you might, if you are doing that, and you may need to change the query from year to year or currency to currency, depending what you're doing, and you might want to put a security protection on who can edit and change that SQL query as well. So a number of different levels, depending what you're looking for or what your customers are looking for security. But once you have access to the file, so you can open up the file and you can open the cube, you've then got access to all the data in the cube. So if you said, well, Anne can see all this information, but she's not allowed to see the intercompany vendors, then what you need to do for that is have a separate cube, and you have a parameter to say which vendor group is being refreshed in the cube, or which vendor groups are being refreshed in the cube. So you'd have one cube with all the vendor groups excluding intercompany, and another cube, and give that to Anne, and another cube with all the vendor groups or just the intercompany, and give that cube to whoever's responsible for the intercompany vendors. So once you have access to all the data, the cube, you have access to all the data in that cube. So that's why Natalie was suggesting a good solution for sales reps cubes is you have the same cube, but have a parameter for sales rep, and pass that in for using Process Scheduler. So the sales rep themselves just gets the cube with their own sales rep code for all the customers or orders, invoices that have their sales rep code on. And that's the way you deal with data level security in Info Explorer.
Okay, thank you. Next question, is it possible to do consolidated reporting on more than one Sage 300 database? The short answer is yes, and there are a couple of samples on the website on that. So you need a full license because your main database is going to be the one that you use to connect, and then you would change your query. We have an example here, and we use union all to add up. In this example, SAM Ltd and SAM Inc, or actually Orc Ltd. So you actually need to go and update the database name in the query.
So in this case, you can see that we've got two companies into this query, Orc Limited and SAM Limited, and it's just treated like a dimension. The query itself is doing a union all between the two company databases. So if you needed this on your one of your clients' data, all you do is download the sample cube. In the properties, you would use the connection to go to the first database, and then you would change the query for the second database. So in our case, SAM Ltd is actually hard-coded in the query. So you'd change the query, and then it would be linked to two databases for your client. But if you needed more than two, you would just copy the query, union all to the third database, the fourth database, and so on. So you can have as many as you want. So this is an example on GL. It is just a summary cube. It's just bringing the balances from the GL AMF table. So you could do quite a few companies. You're not too worried about the volumes because it's just GL summary. If you were doing right down to the posted transactions, you would probably not want to do too many. Oh, this one does have batch entry. You'd probably not want to do too many companies with a batch entry if they're large GLs, because you're just going to run out of memory for the cube. And similarly, you could do it on accounts payable, accounts receivable, any module, any modules that you need.
So the detailed steps are in a knowledge base article, and this particular example is also covered in a advanced Info Explorer training video that is available on the website. Do we have any other questions?
I'm not seeing any others at this stage.
Well, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will be back in a few weeks in May for the next webinar. And yeah, it's early morning for us, so sun is now up. So we'll yeah, go and have breakfast. And we'll send you a recording of the webinar in the next couple of days.
Thanks very much for your time, and have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.